I used to love debating with friends whether the Super Nintendo or Sega Genesis had the best games, and I especially love talking about the RPGs. I'm going to list 5 of my favorite RPGs on both the Sega Genesis and Super Nintendo, and then pick which set were my favorite. Please keep in mind this is just my opinion, and it's for fun as I love talking about my favorite RPGs from the 16-bit era. Oh, and I'll also be selecting by franchise rather than individual games. On Super Nintendo, I have to start with one of the greatest RPG series ever made, Final Fantasy. The first time I played Final Fantasy IV, I was blown away by the scope. The characters and the story were possibly the greatest I'd experienced up until then. I love Cecil's journey from Dark Knight to Paladin, but he wasn't the only one with an arc. The cast was changing all the time, with characters seemingly dying only to show up later, sometimes as enemies. Final Fantasy VI took RPGs to another stratosphere. The cinematic opening made my jaw drop. I didn't know the Super Nintendo was even capable of graphics like these. We got introduced to the greatest villain on the SNES, Kefka, and the music for both games was truly incredible. On the Sega Genesis side, the Phantasy Star games from 2 to 4 were my favorite, with 4 being possibly the greatest game on the Sega Genesis. This series fused science fiction, social commentary, and awesome concepts that felt very unique. I've done reviews on all the Genesis games and replayed them every few years. Unlike Final Fantasy, where each new entry has its own world, Phantasy Star all takes place in the Algo star system, just with 1,000 years separating them. It was a narrative that followed the fate of a galaxy over several millennia. While 4 is the best game in the series, 2 is my personal favorite because of the influence it had on me. Its vision of a utopia gone to hell is still one of the most compelling worlds I've ever played. Back on the Super Nintendo, let's jump to Chrono Trigger. I don't know if there's anything I can say about the game that hasn't already been said a million times. It's up there in the top 5 RPGs of all time. It has everything, from story to memorable characters, fun gameplay, fantastic visuals, incredible music, and one of the most satisfying plot twists of all time. When you find out what Chrono Trigger actually means, it's a pretty awesome moment. The campfire scene and the quest leading to it is one of my favorites. Even though it came out 30 years ago, there's not many games that can compare. It's both amazing and unfortunate to think that after all this time, we've only gotten one sequel for the game. But Chrono Cross was pretty awesome. The Genesis had the Shining series. Shining in the Darkness was a brutal dungeon crawler that I fell in love with. But Shining Force 1 and 2, which are strategy RPGs, became 2 of my favorite games growing up. Recruit an army, take on the Runefaust, and save the world. What made it so special were the epic battles and incredible animations. The way they fought brought them to life as they each had their own unique fighting style. Shining Force was all about telling your own story through the battles. I remember moments like the battle on the bridge against the secret weapon of Runefaust. It still remains one of my favorite battles of any strategy RPG. It's shocking that Earthbound, considered to be one of the best RPGs on the SNES, was a financial failure at the time of its release. Its whimsical take on American life was surreal and humorous, with some surprisingly dark themes injected in. The story invokes an alternate version of America where a bubblegum chewing monkey, time-traveling aliens, and a psychedelic city of illusion called Moonside are part of everyday life. One part that I still remember is Ness's entry into the Happy Happy Village, where the cultists want to paint the entire world blue. When you face their leader, he offers you a chance to help change the world into a happy and peaceful society by becoming his right-hand assistant. But what if I don't like blue? I don't get why Sword of Vermilion doesn't get more love. It's one of my favorite Sega Genesis games, and it has a little bit of everything, including some of my favorite quests of the 16-bit era, like finding a village where all the men have disappeared, or tracking down a young girl who turns out to be a monster. The varying game modes stand out to this day, with the isometric perspective for combat, straight 2D for boss battles, and a first-person view for the dungeons. The catchy music, especially the castle theme, is still wonderful. It might not be the most polished game on this list, but it remains one of the most memorable. The game was a fantasy epic with heart. Terranigma is one of my favorite action RPGs and is about the rebirth of the world. It's also about the follies of humanity, its relationship with nature, a philosophically introspective story probing the quandaries of creation that have been with us since the beginning of humanity. Slowly, Earth is being repopulated by your actions, even though your initial tampering with a mysterious box is what caused all the mishap in the first place. The combat is sublime, the music is haunting, and it's the perfect climax to the unofficial Quintet trilogy. If you haven't played Terranigma, go out and get it, as it's not just one of the best action RPGs on the SNES, but one of the best ever created. Warriors of the Eternal Sun on Sega Genesis was my first experience with Dungeons & Dragons, and initially, I had no idea what I was in for. But I was quickly enthralled. A whole kingdom finds itself displaced into a valley with an eternal sun. You have to figure out how you got there and discover a whole different reality. There's so much I enjoyed about this game, but it was also super challenging. I'd say as a whole, the Sega Genesis RPGs were much harder than the SNES ones. I don't ever recall struggling with any of the bosses in Final Fantasy or Chrono Trigger. Warriors of the Eternal Sun and its dungeons kicked my butt a whole lot. But if you stuck it through, there was a pretty incredible story at the end. Dragon Quest V, along with 7 and 11, are my favorite games in the series. This is a generational tale, and you start as a young boy going on an adventure with your dad. The towns you visit, the people you meet, all become a part of the game's tapestry. A terrible incident forces the hero into slavery for over a decade, and when you're finally free, you find the world has completely changed. This happens again after you have your own kids and revisit the world, but through their eyes. The part that completely caught me off guard was the revelation, you're not the hero. Very rarely can I say a game changed my life. DQ5, with its reflections on family, had that impact. In some ways, this is the game I wish Phantasy Star 3 was. Rings of Power is one of Naughty Dog's earliest games, and it's an incredible open-world RPG for the Sega Genesis. This is another one I covered in a retrospective, and it's a game I wish more people had played. It has a game board-like isometric map, rich lore that's really interesting, numerous NPCs with memorable lines, and a world that's absolutely massive for a 16-bit era game. With a little more polish, I think this game could have easily been one of the best games on the Sega Genesis. Unfortunately, a few issues with the visuals and gameplay prevent it from reaching those heights, but it's a testament to its ambition and storytelling that it still ranks among one of my favorite RPGs on the Genesis. Obviously, both consoles have a lot more RPGs I didn't mention, like Super Mario RPG, Breath of Fire, Secret of Mana, and the Shadowrun games, which have different versions on the differing consoles, both of which are great. But these were 5 of my favorites from both consoles. Both sets of games are incredible. I think for me personally, I love the Sega Genesis games, but the SNES ones slightly edge out as being the better set. But just slightly. This is like being at an awesome buffet and saying, I think the prime rib is a little better than the fantastic sushi. Honestly, both sets are awesome. So please let me know in the comments what you think, and thanks as always for watching.